the beginnings of what you're going to see more of. And I think it speaks to the cold slap in the face that those of you who are MAGA supporters, because of the faux populism that you bought into, the con of a populist president, Donald Trump, he's going to fight for you, he's authentic, all that crap. It was crap. He's always going to take care of the moneyed aristocracy. He's always going to take care of the moneyed elite. And look at what's happened over the weekend. And to help unpack all of that, how about it for some guy who I adore, some guy who's only my favorite British boyfriend, and the guy who leads, in my view, he is the man on the Midas Touch Network. How about it for the great Anthony Davis, everyone? Thank you, sir, for your patience and for being here today.
It's my pleasure. I'd say I'm number 6 or 7 on the Midas Touch Network. I wouldn't say I'm
No, you're my guy. I understand
well, that's
that you're not the guy. We saw something over the weekend that I think speaks to what we're going to see more of in MAGA world, because there are a lot of competing interests. There are the pure nationalist MAGAs, and then there are those who are riding MAGA to victory, but then are just going to take care of the moneyed class, which is really, I feel as though that's fundamentally the game here. I want to run this a little wrap package. It's short, and then I want to get your thoughts. Go ahead, Tony, please.
Before Christmas, far-right figures like Laura Loomer took aim at some in Trump's circle, especially India-born Sriram Krishnan, Trump's top AI advisor, for suggesting the U.S. remove caps on issuing green cards and H1B visas to high-skilled foreign workers.
First, there was a post, Vivek Ramaswamy on X on Thursday. Quote, "A culture that celebrates the prom queen over the math Olympiad champ or the jock over the valedictorian will not produce the best engineers." Elon Musk, who along with Ramaswamy will lead Trump's Department of Government Efficiency, also posted on X that same day, quote, "The number of people who are super talented engineers and super motivated in the USA is far too low." The backlash was fast and furious from Trump loyalists who support strict limits on immigration.
American jobs for American citizen workers.
Trump's former White House chief of staff, Steve Bannon, on his War Room podcast on Friday, calling on stalwart Trump supporter Laura Loomer to explain what she sees as the conflict amongst supporters of the president-elect.
Why are these people who have a history of hating President Trump all of a sudden trying to dictate us on our immigration policy and telling us that we're stupid, we're not the best and brightest, we have to import people to do the job in tech?
Musk posting on X late Friday about some Republicans, quote, "And those contemptible fools must be removed from the Republican Party root and stem." Silent for now on the issue, President-elect Trump.
Well, he's not so silent anymore. That was when that piece first ran. He was silent, which seemed maybe to be the right play politically. But now he's sided, and this is the part that should come as no surprise. If you've been listening to Anthony Davis, you've been listening to me, you've been listening to those of us who say that it is all a fraud, it all is a con, the populist thing. He sides with the Silicon Valley billionaires who want those people who are coming from generally India, but from elsewhere, to be able to populate their businesses. Anthony Davis, your thoughts?
It's the same story as the abortion argument, isn't it? Where he kind of chops and changes on that one. He'll say one thing to one audience. This is the definition of a populist, in my view, to one audience. So if he's playing to the anti-abortion crowd, he's like, you know, all that stuff. And then the moment he is talking to another group to get their affections and attention and votes, of course, he'll change the story, which is why he went into the election with such a kind of woolly argument over abortion and stance on abortion. This is all about being able to get cheap labor. That's all this is. This is cheap labor for him at his hotels and places, cheap labor for his friends in Silicon Valley. It's about bringing in the best and not having to pay them necessarily the kind of, you know, the going rate, and also having access to some of the brightest and the best around the world, which, if they were to do away with H1B, it would cut their noses off to spite their faces. So, it's just follow the money, right? We just follow the money every single time, and you'll come to the answer that you're looking for. And in this case, there is more money to be made, allowing immigrants at senior levels, and even mid-levels, as well as low-wage ones picking vegetables, to come in and work in the United States, which goes to show that, as you and me and everybody in this space quite rightly said, everything is an act. Everything is to build hatred and anger and vitriol. We've seen it with Fox News over the last 20 years, where they just, the other is the enemy. Blame them. And, if we can make them seem like the bogeyman, then we will feel better about ourselves.
Oh, that's so true, and it was so effective politically. I do want to make a distinction. The H-1B visa program really applies to the tech people who they will bring in from overseas, largely from India. In fact, there's a cap on the number of H-1B visa eligible people they can bring in. But that's distinctly different from the agricultural workers and those immigrants.
But it's going to be it's going to end up being the same with the agricultural workers. It's going to be the same. The only people they're probably going to go after are people with criminal records or who've been convicted of crimes.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the American economy cannot function, as we have both been saying, without immigration at a significant level. So most of it was posturing, most of it was performative, most of it was trying to get people to vote for them, and by creating this, this them and us thing. But at the end of the day, Trump knows nothing about economics. He knows nothing about the way that international trade operates, and he especially this idea of the kind of the net versus the gross. How much. This is why he keeps saying things like we're subsidizing Mexico. Like, none of that makes any sense. America is a superpower. It's the largest or second largest economy in the world, arguably, and it will remain that way provided they don't shut the border. And really, that's what Trump wants.
And I think Anthony says something so very important, which we have talked about here, which is, remember, I've spoken before about the fact that, and Anthony I know has spoken of it as well, these high-profile roundups that they'll do. They'll be heartbreaking, they'll make news, and you'll have the sense that there's this mass deportation going on. But just like the wall, they'll build 7 feet of it, and it'll get all over television. He'll talk about how it's built, but they're not really doing the wall, and they're not really doing the mass deportations, because ultimately the business community is the tail that's wagging the Trump dog, and they will not let him pursue mass deportations and throw the agricultural economy on its side, not to mention all the other economies that are linked, but just use the agricultural economy as an example. And similarly here with the H-1B visa caps, they're not going to let him. I mean, they're not going to have a meeting with him. He's going to know. And he'll know in part because Musk makes no question about it. I mean, he goes right on X and says, hey, the best people are the people I'm bringing in. Don't you want America to be populated by the very best people when it comes to technology?
I think it's also worth pointing out that for those of us who have been warning of this performative nature of Trump politics, we are not doing it to kind of own the Republicans or because, we don't want the Republicans to prosper. This is for the country as a whole to prosper, because in fact, I did a very interesting interview, thanks to you, with David K. Johnson on the Weekend Show yesterday. And, we were obviously criticizing the way the U.S. operates. And I read in one comment, Anthony doesn't celebrate America or something like that. And I thought this was very interesting because, and I tried to read all the comments, because to criticize your system is to want it to get better, in the same way that I criticized the UK system when I was working and talking in the UK. And I do think that there has been this kind of idea that unless you are critical of how the system operates and you try to, point things out and it's critique rather than critic, right? That you actually are doing it for the right reasons. And I'm very much of the opinion that this country is potentially the greatest country in the world. I can never quite explain why, but I do believe that it is because I choose to live here. But I also recognize that we need to get better at talking about it and accepting, without American exceptionalism, accepting its flaws and looking where things need to change. And that is not criticism of the country, that is critique because we want it to improve, and we can only do that through this type of discourse.
I was in a taxi last night with a guy who's an immigrant from Afghanistan, and he has 4 kids, and he's been in this country for 10 years, came here when he was in his early 20s. Hang on, and he was saying that we were talking about Afghanistan, we were talking about religion. I asked him, are you deeply religious? I mean, they all speak like 4 languages. So Arab is is not the native language of the Afghanis, but it is the language of faith. Okay, yes. So if you're a Muslim, you know the Arabic as a result of the Quran, etc. And he knows 2 other languages besides that. But anyway, I'm talking to him about all of these different things. And on faith, he said, I came here, and one of the great things about this country is that you guys don't care about what faith anybody is, that the freedom of religion and all the freedoms here are just so terrific. We didn't have any of that, obviously, in Afghanistan, from where I came. And he is deeply religious, okay? As it turns out, he's a deeply religious Muslim, and he can pursue his faith here to whatever degree he wants, and so can his kids. And apart from the religious thing, I just thought, isn't that interesting that the rest of the world sees many of the freedoms we have here as the particularly specific thing that is America, and that is a magical thing.
And completely. However, what is changing is this kind of state warfare, whereas it might become increasingly difficult to practice your Muslim faith in Florida, for example. And, I mean, we even had, do you remember that whole argument after 9/11 about having this kind of Muslim faith center near the ground zero, and there was all of that pushback. And, you know, that frustrated me, obviously, because you can't really connect 9/11 to to moderate Muslim faith in any way. And yet that was the rhetoric at the time. So you're always going to have some kind of misunderstanding or disagreement, or as David K. Johnson talked about, which is something I've never been able to vocalize, the fact that people here are so uneducated by nature of the system that does not afford them the kind of rounded education that other nations get. And, you know, I mean, the statistic he came up with, I've never heard before, but he was talking about like half of people reading at a 5th grade level. And I was just thinking, you know, we would prosper so much more if we were all given a kind of education shot in the arm. And I think this when I hear Marjorie Taylor Greene like arguing in Congress earlier in the year. And I was thinking, I think that she's angry with Democrats because she's secretly jealous that they might be smarter than her.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if to a person the Democrats are smarter, but I mean, she's definitely, as long as we're ranking things, 5th grade, 6th grade, whatever the education level, she's really weak. I mean, she's just not a smart person.
But you know, it's great that you don't have to be smart to be in Congress, but the percentage of people that are unable to really communicate, and so many of these hearings that we've had that have been based on like rumors and nothing, there's no critical thinking. I think going into next year, it's really important that everybody tries to kind of raise the bar on the level of political discourse and the depth to which we need to analyze, because you know, it really isn't as simple as the price of eggs is the reason that Donald Trump won the election. It goes far deeper than that.
Of course, that's true. And it's interesting, and I'm going to circle back around to MAGA and how we started this, but it's interesting predicament that Trump has found himself in. And the predicament is this. You've won all of Washington, both houses of Congress. You have the Supreme Court, which is this concierge court for you. It's not clear to me that he will be able to get a lot done if he goes through, I mean, a lot through executive order, of course, but if he, in terms of legislative achievement, if he goes through traditional channels, I don't see how you pass bills through a thin majority in Congress. I mean, you'll need total and complete adherence to whatever you're trying to put through, and when you don't get it, and you won't, So you may as well consider that. When you don't get it, you can't blame the Democrats. They're not in control of the House. So now I'm sure somehow, because Trump is so good at this stuff, he'll spin it so it's the Democrats who are undermining us, whatever it may be. But I see Trump as in a little bit of a predicament politically as he begins his administration.
But remember, he's a great propagandist. That is a talent that he has that the Democrats do not possess. And his ability to propagandize is the reason he won the election. And so Democrats need to change their tune in a big way going into the new year. Because, and I've been saying for years now, it seems, I wanted Joe Biden to do a weekly press conference denouncing MAGA lies, where he pulled down a flip chart and he said, this week they said this. Well, that's not true because of this. This week they said this. Well, that's not true because of this, this, and this. And actually create a ministry of disinformation where you are working to re-educate people. And it would be interesting, and maybe Fox News would cover it. Do you see what I mean? I think you just have to play these people at their own game, because my concern is that now we're starting to see an awful lot of Trump's supporters and people who voted Trump, not necessarily Trump supporters, but people who had to vote Republican for historical reasons or whatever, having a great sense of buyer's remorse. And they're hearing about the H1B visa. They're also starting to hear about Elon Musk being the president rather than Donald Trump. And they are saying, well, hang on a second, I didn't vote for this. And that noise is going to get louder and louder and louder. And that's going to be Trump's greatest concern, is that the people that were singing his praises are now going to be asking some quite serious questions of him.
So true. And this is a minuscule issue, and yet it does reveal so much about how the MAGA populist loyalists will be so disappointed by where this guy ends up. So, excuse me, I had to clear my throat. So it seems to me now, to get back to the issue, that the Bannons of the world may end up being disappointed, at least initially, with what Musk and Vivek can push through, at least on this H1B visa thing. Musk and Vivek will win. And Trump has said, that he supports them.
And Bannon hates Musk. Let's not forget that. He hates him with a passion. I'm not convinced that Vivek and Musk are going to stay friends for very long, because I've never seen them together. I've never seen them in the same photograph. I've never seen them as a duo. I've only ever seen them speaking independently. So I think that's going to be kind of interesting as to how that relationship plays out, because of course two massive wealthy egos are not going to, they're not going to volley well. They'll spar, if anything. And also I recognize that Donald Trump already is on the golf course and is happy to delegate and is just like, don't bother me with your problems. I won the election. I managed to avoid prosecution. And so just let me be. And I think that is the biggest danger here, is that there are plenty of extremists ready to do the work that Trump is too lazy to do.
This is interesting. MTG's a rich suburban Atlanta housewife and a total fraud, says Harold. Of course, there's some truth to that. Also, though, Dragon Marine, excuse me, I don't know why my throat is so shot. Trump doesn't need MAGA anymore. I think that's really speaking to what you just said, which is, yeah, he doesn't. He's got the presidency. He can skate on his legal issues. And now, you guys work out the details.
Well, because it was a confidence trick. The whole thing was a confidence trick, as we pointed out. And it worked, because confidence tricks do work invariably. But I mean, I also predicted a few weeks ago that he'd stick with the Speaker of the House, which today I've heard that he's endorsing Mike Johnson again. Mike Johnson is a perfect foil for Donald Trump. Well, literally, doesn't have the confidence or the strength or the experience and is grateful for the job, and therefore will operate as a puppet of Trump, who only knows who is pulling Trump's strings, but ultimately what people voted for and what they're going to get are two very different things.
It's so right. And the Johnson thing is an interesting deal, because if he doesn't quite get there, it leaves you without a Speaker of the House, and you have no way to actually certify the election. I mean, you need a house. The House cannot convene without the Speaker. So it'll be a very interesting thing. I'm sorry about my throat. I don't know what's happening. No Contendo says MAGA didn't want a half Indian, but now you have an invasion coming to to take white jobs. The irony is beautiful. Yeah, MAGA as personified by Bannon, indeed did not want that. But they don't want the influx of immigrants. But again, Trump, he appointed Shriram Krishnan as his head of technology, who is Indian and who wants a lifting of the cap of the H1B visas. So the Trump administration, as Anthony's just noted, is going to be far different than what MAGA world was expecting. I commented 2 weeks ago, I didn't see that, something along the lines of white cops with 30 years experience passed over for Kash Patel. Vivek and Elon H1B1 visa drama proves my point. Please talk model citizen versus black dynamic, is that? Or I don't know. Sometimes with No Contendo, I have trouble figuring out the... But
I predict that the Democrats are going to have to bail out the Republicans in a big way at the midterms. I think between now and the midterms, things are going to get so crazy whereby, if these appointments are ratified in the Senate and we do get the Kash Patels and these Pam Bondis and everything else, I think that things are going to become so erratic, and even things as simple as, you report a crime and it just doesn't get investigated. I think, I keep thinking of Back to the Future 2 when Biff Tannen kind of gets the mayoralship and you kind of see Marty going around Hill Valley and the place is just devastated, and Strickland, his old teacher's on the porch with a gun, and the place is just a mess, cars up on bricks and sirens, and that's kind of the worst case scenario, but that's kind of how I feel, that the effect of having a lawless president and lawlessness in all these institutions, I think that's what the effect will be. And it's not going to be Democrats revolting. I think it's going to be Republicans.
No, as I say, I think that we're into a time where they may not even be able to get... I mean, now you have Mike Johnson being endorsed by Trump, and maybe he'll be able to drag him across the finish line. But you have... even that is questioned, and I think there's an inability to get to the finish line on a lot of different issues. And the other thing about H1, I just would love people to know this, is that it's a coveted thing to get one of these visas. It's a really hard thing to get. Much of our audience is in the Bay Area or comes from the Bay Area. We originated there. And so they know that because the tech world is populated by those who have had to work hard to get these visas. But the other thing you should know is that there are agencies dedicated to getting you that visa. And if it's really a cottage industry getting that coveted visa. And if they can get it for you, this is oftentimes the way it works, they then farm you out to these tech bros who want to see this passed. You go work there for $50 an hour, even though it's a $150 an hour job, and they take the 100. That's the way it works. In other words, there's a...
Well, it's human trafficking. What you're describing is human trafficking. Right? But it's legal, there's loopholes because there's profit. And that's why I said when you asked me the question initially, follow the money, because there is a huge amount of money being paid for this. And invariably, people who get the H1B, they are connected to an employer in the United States that will pay the cost of the H1B.
Right.
They'll pay the filing fees, they'll pay the legal fees because they want you, but they also know that they are overpaying invariably for your talent because you're still below market value.
Isn't that wild? They pay all that money and they still save so much. So that's the state of the MAGA bros and the tech bros, and they're playing out at the highest levels, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the Steve Bannon, and then, of course, Musk and Vivek, and then, of course, Trump on the side. But as you've suggested, Anthony Davis, that's just the beginning. It really is just the beginning.
Have you heard that Elon, it turns out, is as interested in eugenics as Trump is?
Oh, my God.
And I'm now starting to hear all of this stuff about, he's into the purity of whiteness and I mean, man, all of your fears about these people, and we have great human instincts, don't we? You really should trust them because most of the things that you feel are going to turn out to be true.
Yeah, these guys, no good is going to come from it. No good is going to come. But anyway, I love that you joined us. Thank you for jumping on with us here at the end of the year. As you look back on this year, Anthony Davis, what things stand out to you?
My failure to call the election correctly will stand out significantly. I was convinced that it was going to be a win for the Democrats, and I've been eating my words, and I've issued many apologies to my followers and supporters.
Just on that note, though, I think one of the keys to because it's particularly instructive when you look back at Jimmy Carter and also I think what you said, which is that you would have recommended that Joe Biden actually, have a weekly sort of meet up with the nation. As it turns out, just as an aside, I don't think Joe Biden could have had a weekly meetup. I don't think he was together enough.
But it could have been delegated. It could have been somebody in the office could have been doing it, not necessarily.
And that might have been a good way to establish somebody on the political scene, by the way. That could have
You
worked.
just have to tackle things head on. Like it's a bit like having an argument with your partner, right? You can either deal with it in the moment, or you can let it fester for 3 days, not speak, and then have a row about it on the weekend. I mean, it's not the way to deal with things. You have to deal with things as they come and in the moment, and get ahead of it as opposed to fighting fires. And I really do believe that any kind of whoever's going to present themselves as Democratic leadership going forward, we're in a bit of a vacuum at the moment, but I really hope that we will see much more thoughtful and controlled analysis rather than just throwing a load of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Yeah,
I mean, sadly, we have these siloed information houses. I think the one thing the Democrats need to do is, I don't know, you can read these comments as we're talking, everybody. I can't acknowledge all of them. One of them was quite laudatory and loving toward you, Anthony Davis, as I saw, but as we all are. But I think the Democrats have to get hip to messengers. It's not enough to be a great crafting of legislation is something that is not just what the job is. It's communicating the legislation that you've just crafted. It's telling people what you've done. Biden had a lot of stuff he could have taken victory laps on, and he didn't. And as it turns out, I think he didn't because he can't speak well. He can't communicate. So I would encourage the Democrats to look to those in the media ecosphere, not purely in the political ecosphere, like the Jon Stewarts of this world. Yeah. People who have a knowledge, but they also have an ability to handle media. They're unflappable. Those are the people who may have to take on the GOP, because the GOP has a structural advantage over the Democrats, and the GOP also, I think, messages better than the Democrats. They elected this guy who's essentially, he's a TV guy. That's all he is. You've talked about it all the time. He says stuff. He propagandizes so well, and then he, goes out on the golf course. You guys handle the details.
He's a clown wearing makeup. I mean, he's literally wearing makeup, and still he got support. And that goes to show that it's not so much about the policies, but it's about the cult and that sense, that feeling that people had that he cared about them, which was, of course, untrue. But I would also like to see, and just in answer to your kind of question about 2024, I would like to see Democratic Congress people and people who work in politics engaging with shows like ours. Because this was a criticism of Kamala Harris about not going on Joe Rogan. You can look to the amount of media, and on, Midas Touch now is leading the digital charts. We need to have politicians on our shows all the time. And as much as I love interviewing academics and experts and commentators, they're still middlemen.
Yes.
And what I need is the actual people to come and engage and reach out to these audiences. And so I really hope that they understand that new media is where people are getting their news, and not legacy media, which doesn't ask the right questions in the first place.
Sure.
And as we saw with the ABC News kind of collapse.
It's weird. I made this point at the time that she would be at all reluctant to sit down with Joe Rogan is laughable to me, because Joe Rogan, in a 2-hour conversation, it's essentially going to be a cakewalk. Maybe there'll be a couple of questions that you'll already be prepped for, like immigration or whatever it might be. The next time he'll ask, what would you have done differently? Is there anything you've done differently from Biden? You'll be able to handle that. But the rest of the interview is just, it creates a three-dimensional kind of positive vibe of anyone who's a guest on the show.
Who are you? That's all it is. And Trump went on there for 3 hours and talked absolute shit for 3 hours.
Sure, made stuff up.
Made stuff up, and there was no pushback, and somehow that fell in his favor. So we need to really talk to the Democrats and have them recognize where it's at now. And I suppose this is part of the problem of having legacy leadership in Schumer and Pelosi, and I have great respect for those people, but they maybe don't understand how people get their news.
I think that's exactly right. And look at what's happened with Chuck Grassley now. Isn't Chuck Grassley going to be beat out AOC?
He's 170 years old.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't get it. In our last second, this from Randy. Geez, it was reported over the weekend or recently that Biden has stated he thinks he could have won the 2020 election and served another term. Yeah, I mean, I saw that as well. It's delusional. It's utterly
He also said he
delusional.
regretted the appointment of Merrick Garland, who slow-walked the investigation into the insurrection. And I was pleased that he said that. I would rather he had done something about that.
Sure.
You know?
I mean, unbelievable. I mean, you could have. Yeah, we did a whole show on Merrick Garland and what an abomination he continues to be, from a professional standpoint. Anthony, you know I love you, and we will talk to you again. But I'm so glad you could come on here and give us the deal. The Midas Touch Network, as you say, it does lead the charts, and your show is your many shows are anything that you're doing. I adore.
Well,
and
likewise.
I love the way you say what you do and do what you do. Thank you for being with us. Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy New Year, Mark. All the
Anthony
best.
Davis, everybody. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.